Guten Nachmittag. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar Wasserinfrastruktur Irland. Danke, dass Sie heute dabei sind. Mein Name ist Josef Tremmel, ich bin der österreichische Wirtschaftsdelegierte in Irland und heute Ihr Gastgeber. Zum Thema Wasser und Wasserinfrastruktur in Irland ist wichtig zu wissen, dass Irland 1977, das ist schon eine ganze Zeit her, das war das Jahr, in dem ich geboren bin, die Wassergebühren abgeschafft hat. Seit damals, seit den späten 70er Jahren, gibt es hier Diskussionen, wer jetzt für die Infrastruktur zuständig ist, wer dafür Geld in die Hand nimmt, wer investiert. Das alles hat zu einem massiven Wasserverbrauch geführt, der dazu geführt hat, dass der durchschnittliche irische Haushalt, der durchschnittliche irische Vier-Personen-Haushalt 340 Liter Wasser pro Tag zurzeit verwendet. In Österreich im Vergleich dazu sind es 130 Liter pro Tag. Und während der letzten Finanzkrise wurde dann der irische Staat von der Troika dazu verpflichtet, Wassergebühren sogar einzuführen. Das hat dann 2015 zu einem massiven Aufstand der Wähler geführt. Und seit damals wurde dann so ein Kompromiss eingeführt. Es wird nicht für den Wasserverbrauch verrechnet, sondern es wird so eine sogenannte Excessive Usage Water Charge eingehoben. Also nur wenn man wirklich massiv mehr verbraucht als der durchschnittliche Haushalt, und das sind jetzt bei fast 600 Liter pro Tag, dann muss man maximal pro Jahr 500 Euro pro Jahr für diese zusätzliche Wassernutzung abführen. Man braucht jetzt kein Mathe-Professor zu sein, um sich auszurechnen, dass sich das einfach nicht ausgehen kann. Es hat aus diesem Grund die irische Regierung beschlossen, hier diesen Investitionsstau aufzulösen, um massiv Geld in die Hand zu nehmen, um hier die Trinkwasserinfrastruktur, aber auch die Abwasserinfrastruktur wieder auf den neuesten Stand zu bringen und vor allem auch Leakage und andere, also Leakage, Overflow etc. Zu reduzieren und auch die immer wieder durch die Medien gehenden Boiling Notices, also Bereiche, wo in gewissen Bezirken, Landkreisen das Wasser nicht getrunken werden kann, ohne es abzukochen, einfach reduziert werden. Zu unserem Webinar heute. Wir haben zwei Experten von Irish Water, die Ihnen heute zum Thema Procurement und auch ausstehende Projekte im Wasserbereich berichten werden. Sie stehen dann auch für Fragen zur Verfügung. Und damit schon soweit von meiner Seite. Wir sehen uns jetzt nach den Vorträgen in der Diskussion. Ich bitte jetzt gleich Kevin Murphy. Could you please activate your camera? Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today. There was also some preparations involved for getting all the information together. And I'm already curious and very much looking forward to your presentation. I think you have to activate your voice still.
Yeah, I think that should be all good. Thanks, Joseph.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Joseph, for having me here. On behalf of Irish Water, I'll be handing over to my colleague Peter Scanlon later in this presentation. But first of all, I would like to talk about the Irish Water, an overview of, I suppose, an introduction to Irish Water and an overview of the Irish Water Company and where we've come from and what we do for the country of Ireland. Then we'll move on to the capital delivery plan, which is my area, basically looking at large-scale infrastructure projects that are coming up over the next number of years as part of the National Development Plan and to upgrade the infrastructure, the water infrastructure. Following that, I'll hand over to Peter to talk about the category management area, which focuses more on assets and equipment and procurement of those pieces of the jigsaw, basically. And then Peter will finish on procurement mechanisms, which I'm sure everybody here is interested to hear about in relation to opportunities that might be there for various companies within Austria. So, okay, I'll move on to the next part of the presentation. Again, thanks Joseph for the introduction and for everybody having us here today. And as I said, we're happy to reach out to the market, and it's always good to make new contacts. So as I mentioned, myself, Kevin Murphy, Capital Delivery Manager, and Peter Scanlon, Category Delivery Manager, are the two presenters today from Irish Water. Just a little bit of a disclaimer, housekeeping on our behalf. Again, the information we're sharing with you today about our various projects or procurement opportunities is, I suppose, current for this moment in time. There's no guarantee that these projects will remain. So basically, this is a disclaimer, just outlining that, and that there is no guarantee of procurements going ahead, etc., etc. So just a typical legal disclaimer for everybody. Okay, so Irish Water as an overview. Founded as a company in 2013. Basically, it's an amalgamation of previous regional water infrastructure management companies across Ireland that's now merged into one company since 2013. As you can see, just some of the figures, expenditure-wise, we spend over 800 million per year on capital projects, again, to upgrade and sustain the overall network within Ireland. There's 1.6 million households that we serve and 200,000 various businesses across Ireland, and that's increasing year on year. And basically, that's one of the key reasons why we have a dedicated national utility for water management now, as opposed to previously multiple regional companies. Just to give another, I suppose, headline figure, the 9 billion figure, that's the investment proposal from 2018 through to 2027. Now, that is reviewed every year with the Irish government, but that is our current, I suppose, portfolio of investment, and that's very much towards increasing the level of the infrastructure over the next number of years to bring it up to a best in practice standard. As you may have heard, I suppose, people looking at the Irish industry for water infrastructure, the network as it is quite old, and therefore there's a lot of issues, whether it's capacity issues or leak issues, or even environmental issues. So therefore there's a big investment plan in place, I suppose, to move Ireland up the ladder when it comes to the standard of our infrastructure. So the capital delivery space where I work, we focus on, again, capital investment projects, design and build projects, construction, and the procurement of same. It's split into 3 pillars. We work with the asset delivery area, which has multiple design and construction programs and projects. I would say medium scale projects. Then there's major projects, which by their definition are large scale, singular infrastructure projects. And then the water supply project, which I'm heavily involved in at the minute, even though it's only at initiation phase. That's a project to basically create a new water supply source within Ireland to serve the Eastern and Midlands region of the country, which incorporates Dublin City, which is our largest city by quite some distance. So therefore, you know, that new piece of infrastructure is a crucial project. Our overall role within capital delivery is looking at the strategy for projects and how they're delivered, working with the designers, etc., in relation to that, and then moving through the procurement process with the market, delivering procurement procedures of various strands, and then moving to contract execution. So we work very much hand in hand with all the departments within Irish Water, from, I suppose, the blue sky thinking all the way through to getting contracts executed, to get, you know, work on the ground, get the trenches dug and the pipes laid, etc. So just moving on to give you an overview of some of the key infrastructure projects. As I mentioned earlier, Irish Water is at the heart of the National Development Plan produced by the Irish government, again, to upgrade the overall infrastructure standard. Some of the key projects that we have either ongoing or in initiation phase or even planning phase at the moment, just to give you some examples. The water supply project, which I mentioned earlier, that's an initiation phase. So we'd say route design, planning, etc., is happening on that at the moment. It's due to submit for planning permission to actually build the project within the next year or so, with the aim to go and build it out between 2025 and 2030, which is, you know, in some eyes, I suppose that's quite a ways away, looking into the future. But there's a lot happening in that project, and there may be opportunities for some of you on this call today in relation to that in future, whether it's supply of materials, you know, obviously pipeline, valves, etc., materials for the various infrastructure sites, and then also the construction of the project itself. We probably most likely will have multiple construction contracts across the breadth of that project. It runs from the west of the country through to the east. In basic terms, there's a large water treatment plant and extraction point pretty much in this area where that photograph is taken. But then there's a 172-kilometer pipeline to stretch all the way to Dublin. So, you know, again, large-scale cross-country pipeline project, very much, you know, a future opportunity, I think, for companies to get involved there. Just another one or two examples. Now, some of these won't be of any opportunity to people on the call today, as they're already in construction. But again, just to give you an outline, I suppose there's works happening at various parts of the country. Cork Lower Harbour, which is a major drainage upgrade project. You've got Arklow wastewater treatment in the east of the country. You know, Blanchardstown, which is close to Dublin, another regional scheme upgrade. And Vartry Reservoir, which is south of Dublin, again, another major project. All these projects, the four projects on the right-hand side, approximately 1 to 200 million each in value, and have various contracts happening in parallel to deliver those projects. The water supply project is estimated at over €1 billion at the moment. Again, it's in early stages, but by its nature, there will be, I suppose, potential for opportunities for yourselves in the market over the coming years. Again, just to outline at the bottom, we have multiple regional and national programs as well of various sizes. Now, some of them are run through frameworks that are already in existence, and we have contractors on those frameworks, so there won't be opportunities. But many of them in the future may be open to the market for either new frameworks or standalone procurements. And Peter will touch on some of the procurement opportunities and mechanisms later on. Again, just on the figures, I suppose to give you an idea of Irish Water plans on the medium term, we've kind of looked at the overall, I suppose, 2040 plan almost, and now just narrowing it down to the next 4 years and within Irish Water itself. So you can see some of the figures. There's an investment plan approved for over 5 billion, and to get that spent, we obviously need various suppliers, partners, construction contractors, and it's split in these areas between asset delivery, which I would have referred to earlier, the strategic projects, which are more the major projects, and the likes also of water supply, asset management, which covers mainly the blue sky thinking, analysis, a lot of, I suppose, engineering, analytics basically, and then other projects which may be, you know, related to IT and facilities, etc. But look, I just wanted to put this slide in here to give you an overview of the next 4 years, that there's a substantial amount of money to be spent by Irish Water, some of the areas that we plan to spend it in, that look, there may be opportunities there within the market. Narrowing it down further for 2021, what we're looking at here is a snapshot of some of the construction projects that are planned for 2021 and how we're due to procure them. So you'll see on the right-hand side, the green part of that pie chart, approximately 160 million based off of 12 different projects. Now they're being run off of an existing framework. So therefore we have all the, I suppose, the tier 1 contractors within Ireland on that framework. And we would do many procurements with them and call-offs. So that's what that covers. We've also a national for more civil-based projects. We've got a national civils framework. We're planning to be running 8 competitions or projects off of that worth 75 million. And then there may be others some of which are within frameworks, others outside of frameworks that might be, again, opportunities. Just to give you a little idea, I suppose that the 4 bullet points down the bottom, these are some of the areas where we require partners and people to come in and work with us. So design partners, ground investigation contractors are crucial at the moment. We're doing a lot of, again, pre-construction investigation to confirm designs and to, de-risk projects. Project management and engineering consultants, looking for a lot of those people. We've got, for the water supply project at the moment, we're at pre-qualification stage, or just finishing pre-qualification stage, to appoint a client partner, which is basically a project management and engineering consultant merged into one. Now, again, that opportunity started almost a year ago, so there won't be anything in that area for you right now, but in future there may be more opportunities that we have, open competitions away from our frameworks, and as I said, there may be opportunities. Then site construction management also they're beyond the construction itself. There's areas there for managing the works as they go along. Again, a lot of these are procured off of the existing frameworks, but in future there could be opportunities for either new frameworks or standalone competitions. So I suppose that's the snapshot of the look ahead for 2021, and what we're looking to do in the construction space. That's pretty much it from me. I'll hand over now to my colleague Peter Scanlon, who's going to talk about the category management area. But look, we're happy to take questions later on in the end of the webinar session as well. Thank you.
My name is Peter Scanlon, and I work as a category manager for Irish Water. I suppose my specific remit is for mechanical assets, and that's in the assets and equipment category. So today what I want to do over the next couple of slides is just give you a very brief overview of the type of activities that we do in category management. And I'll also give you a sort of a flavour of some of the maybe more recent competitions that we've run, and some of the kind of upcoming competitions that are going to be advertised, and again, potentially something that you might be interested in. And following that, I'll just run through some of the procurement mechanisms, because obviously, being a public entity, we are bound by ODU and the EU public procurement regulation. So there is a little bit of information in there if you're not used to doing that before. So just going to speak about category management. So category management basically looks after a lot of operational day-to-day activities within Irish Water. It's quite a large team within our supply chain. It's probably looking after around maybe 800 million worth of procurements in a given year. So it's quite a busy space. And in the category management section, basically we're responsible for the end-to-end procurement of products and services. So typically in a day-to-day, it would start off with sourcing strategy, and our sourcing strategy will be members from our team working very closely with the business in terms of the requirements that we have. So again, identifying any procurement activities that come up there. In particular interest to yourselves, we do a lot of work on the market engagement side. So obviously presenting at events like today, going out meeting suppliers and just listening to the market in terms of what's out there and what's available. Obviously, looking for, I suppose, like examples of innovation as well from the market is something that we do quite regularly. So essentially, once we're responsible as well for completing the category plans and sourcing strategies that Irish Water require. So once we get past that kind of stage, then another one of our key areas is the tendering process. So our team would look after the end-to-end process in terms of tendering. So then this is everything from issuing a PIN notice, which is obviously given pre-warning to the market that something is coming, to actually carrying out the tendering activities, to coordinating the sort of evaluations, and also seeing that through to contract award. So obviously notifying the successful tenderers, of the outcome of competitions, and liaising with them in terms of getting the contract piece going as well. And obviously for yourselves, if you're successful in a particular competition, we have a contract management piece as well. And obviously contract management then would look at the contract management, supplier performance, and sort of all the elements associated with that. So again, as you can see, category management within Irish Water is quite a busy space. Involves sort of like, the day-to-day business activities all the way through, and then obviously setting and executing sourcing strategies against the various categories, and I'll come on to the categories in a little bit. So just to note there, I put a little note down at the bottom as well. Obviously, you mentioned about the EU public procurement thresholds. Again, when we're looking at works contracts above sort of 5.5 million euros, you're talking a full OJU process there. And also then it's equivalent in supplies and services. When you go above 443,000, you're looking at a sort of a full OJU process there as well. So it's important for prospective tenderers to understand the OJU process, and I've got a slide later on which I'll cover off in that as well. So the next slide, this is intended to give you a flavour of the types of activities and procurements that we look after in category management within Irish Water. So on your left-hand side, you have category management pillars, and I'll just quickly go through those. So assets and equipment is the category that I look after. So working in the mainly the mechanical asset side. So typically what you'd see here in this area is DBO, and DBO stands for design, build, operate. So this is where maybe water treatment works, etc., are designed, built, and commissioned by a third-party operator. Mechanical assets falling under that kind of area, you have pumps, screens, inlets, compressors, anything really associated with the critical infrastructure of the network. So in terms of the actual fixed assets like treatment works, pumping stations, all that would fall in this area as well. Now we also look at the sort of the network side as well. So the network side of the assets and equipment tower is mainly focused around valves and pipes. So it's the actual physical pipe that goes into the ground that connects all of our assets together and delivers services to our customers, be it both domestic and commercial. So in terms of another category, we have indirect and professional services. I know Kevin sort of touched on it there in the previous slides, but this is really looking at sort of engineering services or professional services that the business may require. So you have everything in there from civil engineering to specific consultancies, maybe such as environmental services or anything else that's kind of required under that remit. IT, telecoms, and customer care. Again, obviously, an organisation like ourselves, quite a big demand for IT services, and also customer care. So obviously, we supply drinking water to the majority of people in Ireland, and obviously wastewater as well. Therefore, we have a contact centre where people and customers can call in to inquire about their services. So again, that's quite a large area in terms of the IT, telecoms, and customer care area. Then I suppose I mentioned previously that we sort of look after the operational side of the business as well. So again, operational consumables and services is quite a large area of category management, and that looks at sort of the day-to-day running, really the sort of types of activities, procurement activities that you need in order to operate the network and the assets effectively to deliver water to our customers. So typically in that area, you'll find items such as chemicals, that supply of chemicals, repairs and maintenance, which is kind of more of a servicing contracts where basically this is responsible for all the repairs and maintenance in the network and also the assets. And you'll find other activities such as jetting, so jetting, obviously jetting of the network, and also large material frameworks that are actually sitting under the operational consumables as well. So again, different types of materials that Irish Water will require. So everything from your valves, gates, fittings, pipe fittings, all that kind of thing are covered under that tower as well. And then finally, we have utilities, logistics, and facilities. So one of the big areas here is obviously electricity, and that's mainly talking about the electricity market and procuring electricity in advance. Fleet is another big one for us as well in terms of the size of the vehicle fleet that we own and operate. So again, there's a large vehicle fleet out there with all our operations guys using that. Plant hire as well is another big one underneath that. So all the temporary types of equipment and sort of portable equipment that's required by our teams. And then there's obviously the facilities management piece as well, which is just talking about sort of our established facilities. So as a national utility, we obviously have offices in Dublin, but we'd also have offices around the country in Ireland as well. So the facility management sort of arm would look after that as well. In general, I suppose, A lot of these types of products and services are covered under large frameworks. So typically Irish Water would set up some large frameworks and essentially procure their services under that once they're set up. So again, it's very important just to understand that, you know, especially when we hit above the large ODU thresholds, a lot of the procurement is actually done by offering large frameworks, and then obviously tenders and interested parties such as yourselves are invited to tender for that. And typically a lot of frameworks will be set up. There will be standalone competitions as well for specific sort of areas, and I'll give some examples of that later. But again, a lot of the sort of activity that goes on in the category management area tends to focus around large frameworks, and then once large frameworks are in place, then there's like a lot of competitions which are run off those frameworks, or we direct procure off the frameworks as well. So the next slide is just to kind of give you a flavour of some of the activities that we've completed within category management, and more of them are around the mechanical asset side, which kind of falls into my area. So for example, we've just recently completed a multi-supplier framework for the provision of pumps and associated works to Irish Water. So this was a large-scale pumping framework. So the lot one was the actual supply and delivery of pumps, and the lot two was concerned with the installation of pumps. So again, this framework is intended to run over approximately 4 years. It's in the region of about 75 million. It's quite a big framework, but again, it's looking at the typical kind of pumps and associated services that are supplied to Irish Water, and the pumps can include any ancillary items as well. So again, that was quite a large one that we ran there, and that was done on the purpose of a framework. So then moving on, we've got Guidor low pressure sewage system, which is another supply of pumps, but a little bit different to, I suppose, the framework for pumps. This was looking at a more innovative pumping solution, and this was a standalone competition. So again, that was for low pressure sewage system for parts of the network up in the northwest of Ireland in Donegal, and I was looking at sort of a bespoke sort of solution to that area as well. So again, it just shows that, you know, whilst we go up with some large frameworks under pumping, we also have some standalone competitions as well that more necessarily wouldn't be covered by the scope of the wider framework. So I mentioned repairs and maintenance. Another big framework for Irish Water was the repairs and maintenance framework. So that was recently completed as well. Again, that's more around probably the service provision. So within that framework, you have a civil engineering aspect, and you also have a mechanical aspect, and you also have SCADA, so instrumentation. So again, that framework was quite large, and once set up now, that will provide repairs and maintenance services for Irish Water for the next couple of years again. So typically the frameworks will run for about 5 years before we go back out to market, but you could see market engagement as early as 3 years, depending on how big the framework is, in order to get the other one up and running as soon as the term comes to an end. As I mentioned previously, again, another big one covered off this year was the provision of jetting services framework. Again, jetting, obviously important to keep the network going, so that's ensuring that blockages are cleared, and we have you know, a national level service available for that as well. So that framework was put in place again just at the back end of last year. So again, another big framework that's running there. The next one is more or less focused on I suppose materials and sort of supply of materials. So this was a multi-supplier framework for the supply of aggregates to Irish Water. So as you can imagine, from all our civil activities and all our sort of construction activities, aggregate supply is quite a big one there as well. So again, this is more for types of materials. So went out to various aggregate suppliers around the country, and obviously stood up that framework as well in terms of that. I mentioned the customer contact center. Again, that was closed out last year. That was quite a big one as well in terms of setting up a customer contact center and the service contract for that again. And then we've also got the Irish Water Engineering Services, which again is a servicing contract again for more specialist kind of bespoke engineering services. So that's just a flavour of some of the competitions that have been run under category management in the last year or so. This is an example of some of the projects which are currently in market, and some of the projects which will probably be coming up as well, which may be of interest to yourselves. Again, so it's just to kind of give you a flavour of the different types of activities. So, for example, Irish Water are building a brand new national laboratory, and that's down in Limerick in the west of Ireland. And again, that project is currently in market now for PQQ, and that's looking at the procurement installation of all the equipment associated with the lab fit out. So again, it's quite a big competition again, and currently a market. So anyone who's sort of typically interested in sort of laboratory fit out can go visit and get the scope on that, and I'll explain how that works in a few minutes as well. Again, another one at market is the wastewater source control and trade effluent. So this is mainly looking at more of a service contract. So this is kind of looking at, I suppose, how we ensure compliance in terms of laboratory testing and testing of wastewater and water. So again, just a different flavour of competition there for more of a services contract. The one coming after that as well, biodiversity chapter and in-house peer review for the water supply project, Eastern and Midland regions. Again, this is just another typical sort of services procurement that we're looking at, which basically is very specific in terms of what the requirement is. So again, a big project there for a water supply project in the Eastern and Midland region. And again, this procurement will complement that and obviously provide services around biodiversity and peer review for the team there. So I mentioned chemicals earlier. So that framework was stood up a couple of years ago, and again, there'll be a replacement framework required for that. So that'll be, the supply of chemicals into Irish water. And again, that's everything to do with typical chemicals that you use in the water treatment process, or chemicals that you might use for wastewater treatment as well. Obviously, I suppose complications maybe have arisen because of Brexit as well. So obviously, looking out into the European market as well is something which is definitely of interest as well. So again, that's one to look out for in the future. It'll be quite a large framework when it does come up. Another framework which is coming up soon in the near future as well will be the provision of water meters. This is something which sits in my space, I suppose, specifically. And again, it's looking at the supply of water meters to Irish water. So again, quite a large scope in that, because it'll be looking at sort of domestic meters and also be looking mainly at commercial meters as well. There'll be some requirements around smart metering and a bit of innovation there as well, looking into the future of what sort of the future of water meters might look like as well. So again, just another thing there on the mechanical asset side, probably in terms of looking at that. And of course, then in the future as well, multi-supplier framework for sludge management. So obviously, by the nature of our business, sludge management is quite an important feature as well. So on the water treatment side, again, our colleagues there will be looking in the future to launch a sort of a large competition around that as well. So again, I suppose the couple of slides here were just kind of to give you a flavour of maybe some of the procurements that we've successfully run, and some procurements that are going to be coming up in the future. So hopefully it's of interest to some of the people here on the webinar. So if I just move on to the next slide. This is procurement mechanisms. So I'm briefly going to touch on some of the procurement mechanisms here, because as I explained earlier, obviously we are governed by EU procurement law. And again, important to remember when we're talking about the ODU thresholds as presented earlier on the slides, they are different procurement mechanisms, which is important for us to understand when we're tending with an entity such as ourselves. So if I just move on to the next slide, I thought it'd be useful to give you an overview of the procurement mechanism. I'm guessing people already involved with sort of public procurement utilities directive will understand some of the terminology here. But again, it's very useful just to quickly run through this, because a lot of our competitions will fall under these procedures. And in particularly, I suppose the first one there at the top of the list in terms of the negotiated procedure with prior call for competition, that's something that we use quite regularly in terms of the category management space, especially for some of the larger procurements that I just detailed there. And typically that will involve a two-stage process whereby a pre-qualification questionnaire will be sent, and obviously that will be evaluated to assess the suitability of the prospective tenderers coming forward, and then that will be followed by an ITT, invitation to tender. So the important thing, I suppose, to remember about this one, it's a two-stage process. Once you get past the initial PQQ stage, you will then be invited to the invitation for tender stage. And again, as I was saying, that is probably one of the more sort of bread and butter sort of standard procedures that we use, and we have done so in quite a lot of the previous competitions. Now, it does say prior call for competition as well. So something just worth noting there on that is that we do fairly regularly issue a PIN notice, and a PIN notice will precede all competition. So a PIN notice, basically, as most of you are probably aware, is just a sort of a call for information from the market. So we will use a PIN notice to kind of gauge market appetite for a certain competition, or we'll look at sort of maybe some of the innovation that's been offered there. So again, typically the large sort of frameworks that we do procure will have kind of a PIN notice associated with it. Then we'll probably look at, as I mentioned at the top of the slides, we look at doing some supplier engagement as well. So it's very important if you do see the PIN notice coming out to engage with that if you are interested in that particular competition, because more than likely it will lead to some supplier engagement events, and you know they're held probably virtually in this day and age now, but we do hold sort of a wide variety of those as well. So again, moving on quickly then, so the open procedure is basically a one stage with no negotiation. That we have used that in the past, but as I was saying, we're probably looking more at the negotiated procedure now. Competitive dialogue again is something that we will use. It's just in our toolbox should we require it. I suppose it's where we probably look at more dialogue with the prospective tenderers in terms of finalising a final solution there. Dynamic purchasing system, and that's a one stage. So basically, if we have sort of commonly used items in the category side or on the consumables, we might look to utilize a dynamic purchasing system there again. But again, all these are obviously advertised through the OD process. So prospective tenderers and suppliers will be made aware of that in advance before any of these are stood up. Again, qualification systems is something we're starting to look at now as well. Mainly on the gas side of the business, but in water we're starting to look at the qualification systems as well, where again, if we have large sort of items that are procured quite regularly, we might look to set up a qualification system and bring suppliers on there. So effectively it sort of completes a PQQ type process for us in terms of having suitable suppliers there ready to tender for competitions. Restricted procedure, so again that's another one that's open to us as well. So used probably sparingly, not as much as the other ones. So that's where we pre-qualify suppliers based on financial standing, technical or professional capability, and it's time bound. But as I was saying, mainly we look at the negotiated procedure. Sometimes open procedure is used on occasion, but again, it's mainly the negotiated procedure. And then of course, one of the big things to note as well, I suppose, is that we run an awful lot series of mini competitions from existing frameworks. So typically, if you're successful and brought onto the framework, a framework will have its own kind of set of boundaries and rules. And typically, if a procurement is to be run off a framework, we'll run a mini competition off that framework, depending on what the requirement is from the framework participants. So again, it's quite important if you can get on the frameworks when they do come up, because that's generally where we go to the first port of call in terms of meeting requirements. So that just kind of gives you a flavour of the sort of procurement mechanisms that we use within Irish Water. I suppose it's just worth noting, if you're familiar with the EU sort of regulations, I mean, a lot of this will be standard stuff. You probably appreciate what needs to be done there. And then in terms of how you actually physically register interest in terms of procurements with Irish Water. So basically all of our procurements are delivered via the Irish government portal, and that's called e-tenders. And then prospective suppliers and tenders can register on e-tenders. So it's very important that you register on e-tenders, because you can register on e-tenders through the registration process. Then you kind of declare what type of activities or what type of products and services you are interested in. And then obviously once these kind of products and services competition comes to market or a PIN notice is issued, the e-tenders allows notifications to be sent back to prospective tenderers on potential competitions that might be of interest. So again, I think Joseph has a couple of slides on e-tenders later on in the deck, but again, it's quite important that e-tenders is utilised in order for you to find out upcoming competitions. So that's kind of it for me. I think myself and Kevin are staying on for questions, but if I just hand back to probably Joseph now to take it through to that part. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. Please stay with me and Kevin. I got a couple of questions here, and I'll start with the first one. There was a question on considerations, and I'm not 100% sure if you're the experts to talk to. Do there exist considerations for industrial and commercial dirt water for hotels, catering, hospitals, etc.? Is there some tenders on the line that the government would basically invest to reduce waste in these areas? Would you know of something?
Yeah, I'm probably not best placed to do that. Now, if they're talking about private side as in with the the hotels and buildings themselves, that wouldn't fall under the remit of Irish Water. But I suppose just moving back a couple of steps, there are lots of programs in relation to wastewater reductions, leakage reductions, etc. So there are ongoing programs happening in relation to that, all right, but not any major procurements that I'm aware of.
Of course. Thanks. Another question, how much is covered by the frameworks and how much is done at the standalone level? And are most of the construction groundworks done more through one or the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think from the construction, and we'll call it even the DBO, which Peter referred to, design, build, and operate, which obviously is used mostly for treatment plants. In general, I would say it's probably 60% maybe off of the frameworks, maybe even 70%. The standalone are kept for, I suppose, the large scale one-off projects, that I suppose unique projects almost, that come up maybe every few years. And even just going back to my example earlier from where we were looking at the water supply project, looking at the Cork Lower Harbour and Arklow, they're the type of projects that would mostly have, I suppose, a standalone competition, where the more regional ones would be procured off the frameworks. But if I was to say a figure, probably 70% off the frameworks and then 30% of construction through standalone.
Yeah, just pick up on that as well. I think in the category management space, the kind of first port of call will be a framework. So we look to see if the framework is in place to cover the sort of the requirement, and then typically, this sort of standalone competitions. If it wasn't covered under a particular framework, we would run a standalone competition. I think like the example I get probably of the one in Guido, recent low pressure pumping system, that was more an innovation project, so a bit more bespoke than potentially what was covered under the framework. So that's probably why that went standalone. But again, probably similar to what Kevin is saying there, 70% plus will be covered in the frameworks, kind of first port of call.
There's another question which goes in the same direction. I mean, the frameworks, they are assigned to one company, and this company that won the framework is certainly published on e-tender because it's all public.
The framework, and again, sorry, Peter can come in a second also, but the frameworks are almost always multi-supplier frameworks. There are instances where you may have, I suppose, a bespoke product or a piece of work where you would have just one single company on the framework, but the vast majority of the frameworks would have multiple companies. So for instance, our main construction frameworks may have 6, 7, 8 suppliers on that framework, and then for each construction project, we would do a competition amongst those 8 suppliers or contractors from that framework. So most of the time, it's a multi-supplier framework.
Okay,
yeah.
And this would be then this mini, I mean, Peter, the last thing you mentioned was this mini competitions. So this would be then within the framework, 8 companies qualified.
Yeah.
For each mini competition within this bigger framework, you would have them, I don't know, for valves, for example, within a bigger framework, you would then do extra competitions.
Yeah, that's correct. So just picking up on what Kevin said there was typically in the category management side, most of the frameworks that we have are multi-supplier. So for example, if I just take the recent pumps framework, there was 2 lots in pumps, and the first lot is for supply and delivery. So across that first lot, you had 7 different sublots and 5 suppliers in each sublot. And then in the lot 2, you had 10 suppliers, which is the install. So typically the way a framework works is within the framework, you have a set of rules and boundaries. And essentially, if a particular piece of work or a program of work comes up that can be delivered by the framework, and if that's over a certain threshold in the rules call-off conditions of the framework, then essentially we run a mini competition from the framework suppliers. So the suppliers in there will have an opportunity to tender for those large pieces of work as well.
Okay, and as a practical example, for example, if you have a company that is doing ground investigation contracts. Kevin, that's maybe in your line of business. So if you do this big pipeline project from Central Ireland to Dublin, this is several frameworks, as you explained. And where would a ground investigation contractor plug in there?
So we have a ground investigation framework, and there's currently 5 companies on it. So if we want to do some ground investigation works, and actually your timing is quite apt, because we're in the middle of a procurement for a ground investigation on that exact pipeline, the water supply pipeline. So what we do is run a mini competition on that framework. We can split it up into different geographical lots, but basically the competition is limited to the companies that exist on the framework. However, depending on, again, the scope of ground investigations, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, we need a much larger scope of ground investigations. And, you know, from things like market engagement, we realize, okay, the contractors on our framework are at capacity. So therefore we may say, look, the framework isn't suitable, we won't be able to deliver the works. So therefore we'll go and have a standalone competition.
Very interesting. So basically I could tell this gentleman who just asked to look up the framework, and he would say the 5 companies that qualified, and this would be potential partners for him to work in the Irish market.
Yeah, that's possible, exactly. So, and that, I suppose that's one of the points to get across, indeed, is, okay, the frameworks themselves are limited, but obviously the companies that are on the frameworks, they themselves look for partners and suppliers, and that's absolutely an opportunity, you know, for people. Now, we can't necessarily share, I suppose, from the rules of fairness, we can't share, you know, all the names of all the companies that are on these frameworks. But, you know, for instance, you know, from the construction point of view, all the tier 1 contractors for construction within Ireland, you know, most of them are on our frameworks.
Of course. Perfect. There's a lot of questions coming in. The next one is, will there be a national program like in the UK for the upgrading of existing wastewater treatment plants for nutrition removal? If so, will there be free selection of technology with yellow or silver book, FIDIC?
Okay, they're wondering about the form of contract. Not sure about a national program. Like there are ongoing national programs within Irish Water at the moment for various upgrades of water treatment plants or wastewater treatment plants. I suppose just to mention on the contract side of things, which I think that person is alluding to, in the FIDIC type of contract, we use various types of contracts depending on the type of project. There is an Irish Water bespoke contract terms and conditions that we use for a lot of construction projects. Similarly, the frameworks have their own contract terms and conditions, but also we do use FIDIC, for instance, for a lot of our projects, especially where there's, you know, an operating period required. And we also use the NEC form of contract for professional services and construction. But to that person's question, I suppose various, again, it depends, but we use various forms of contract.
Perfect. Thanks. There's another question. Vienna Water Monitoring Solutions is offering a new and innovative technology for rapid microbiological measurements, which has been commercially available only for a few years. Thus, tenders where we participate are usually initiated by the utilities interested in this kind of technology. So where and how to start at Irish Water in order to provide information about capabilities, applications of our technology? It's maybe you have like an innovation center or some like specific persons to talk to if you have like a novel technology.
Yeah, I was thinking, Peter, it's probably maybe some people within our asset management area, or they're the people that do the analysis of the overall network. There may be some context that we could provide afterwards in relation to that. Maybe we can follow up with Joseph on that to provide that person a contact.
Yeah, there is a sustainability and innovation team within Irish Water, and part of their remit is typically to look at maybe new products and services that come to market. That's probably we can get some contact details there. Yeah.
Perfect. And so we still have a little bit of time, and still, like, most people are still on there. There's one question on I mean, there was, I guess you had a lot of companies participating from the UK until now, just because of the historic language similarities. Do you see any changes for, like, in the immediate future, that there's less companies participating from the UK? Did you see some tendencies in your daily work, or not really?
I think from sort of the category management point of view, some of the categories would have sort of a lot of historic links to with the UK in terms of like chemicals and meterings, that kind of stuff. I mean, we have seen a little bit of sort of change in terms of the complications that Brexit bring in. It probably hasn't hit sort of mainstream yet for us, because, say, for example, in the say if I take pumps now, for example, whereby I look after the pumps category, a lot of manufacturers and stuff actually are based in mainland Europe, or kind of streamline business to mainland Europe as well, thereby bypassing sort of the UK and the issues there. Obviously, we share a land border with the UK as well in terms of Northern Ireland, so we do have like a lot of suppliers in the north that maybe work with Irish Water as well. So there has been, on the run up to Brexit, I suppose, Irish Water did a bit of work around Brexit readiness and looking at how it will impact from our suppliers. A lot of suppliers in our space were kind of getting ready beforehand, and obviously streamlining their businesses to be able to continue to supply into us. But I think as sort of the the meat of the deal and all that kind of stuff kind of figures out over the next couple of months, I think that's when we'll probably see maybe slightly more. But I do know some companies are sort of readjusting their sort of their offerings, like or maybe instead of serving us out of the UK, we'll service from mainland Europe instead. But yeah, so there is a small little bit, but nothing dramatic as of yet.
Okay. Yeah,
but some issues, yeah.
Perfect. And the last question was on leakage. Is there like a special? Is it a framework maybe on leakage reduction, or is this just an overall goal to reduce leakage in the area, or is this a single point of contact also for companies that have maybe novel solutions?
Yeah, maybe the innovation team probably for a contact. I suppose the leakage program is up and running. It's regionalized from a contractor point of view, with various frameworks as well in different regions. But if there's somebody with I suppose an offering of different technology that might help, I think we can revert to that innovation contact that we'll try and get you.
That would be great. Perfect. Thank you very much. That was all the questions. Thanks for taking the time, for being with us today and preparing the preparation and everything. I'll send you the information of all our participants later on. And I'll continue now a bit, just 2 minutes on e-tenders, and I'll continue in German then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, jetzt noch ganz kurz zum Abschluss. Peter Scanlon hat zum Schluss nochmal auf e-tenders verwiesen. Und ich habe jetzt bei den Fragen noch kurz mal nachgehakt, wie es aussieht mit der Beteiligung von britischen Unternehmen an Ausschreibungen in Irland. Hintergrund ist folgender: Aufgrund des Ausscheidens des UK aus der Europäischen Union dürfen jetzt britische Unternehmen an Projekten nur mehr über gewissen Schwellen teilnehmen. Das ist bei Bauleistungen jetzt über 5,3 Millionen Euro und bei Dienstleistungen und Produkten bei Ausschreibungen nur mehr über 140.000 Euro. Also das ist eigentlich, darunter dürfen britische Unternehmen am irischen Markt nicht mehr anbieten. Und die Office of Government Procurement hat allen irischen Behörden und Unternehmen geraten, sich zweimal zu überlegen, ob sie tatsächlich in UK einkaufen wollen. Wir haben dazu ein Webinar gehalten. Wir schicken Ihnen gern den Link mit, wo Sie das Webinar, wie man sich bei eTender anmeldet, wie man dort Informationen findet etc., wo Sie das nachschauen können. Das ist unter Umständen auch für Sie interessant, wenn Sie in Zukunft wirklich am irischen Markt tätig werden wollen, um sich ein bisschen auch mit dieser Technologie und mit dieser Plattform, die ist jetzt nicht großartig kompliziert, aber damit Sie sich mit dieser Plattform bekannt machen wollen. Das war es auch schon von meiner Seite. Ich hoffe, dort, wo es noch offene Fragen gibt, werden wir die beantworten. Falls Sie Fragen haben zum irischen Markt, auch Partner suchen am irischen Markt, schreiben Sie uns. Wir helfen Ihnen gerne weiter. Und damit war es das von meiner Seite. Ich wünsche Ihnen einen schönen Tag und alles Gute nach Österreich.